You're listening to Tabletop Arcanum, a podcast dedicated to learning and exploring the hobby of tabletop gaming. Your hosts are Justin Taylor and Richard Geese, so sit back and relax as we talk, discuss, and joke our way through the hobby we love so much. All right, welcome to another episode of the Tabletop Arcanum podcast. My name is Justin, and we have...
And, Ricky.
So, last time we were talking GenCon Day 0/Day 1.
Yep.
This time we're looking at Days 2, 3, 4.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get there, I kind of want to touch base and catch up. It's been a little bit of time since we last sat down. What have you been playing?
I've been playing a lot of Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle. To the point that I've had to get card sleeves because second player keeps throwing cards into various vegetable dips.
Wait,
Other than that...
I'm going to stop you there. There's more than one dip incident, or are we just talking the one dip incident?
The one, but I mean, history's bound to repeat itself. There's usually dips around.
Okay. I think that we'll have to talk about that concept in a future episode.
Yeah. Protecting your goods.
Protecting your goods, upgrading your games, things of that nature.
Yeah.
Sleeve or not to sleeve, that is the question.
Other than that, I've mostly been painting my Star Wars Legion figures. Or Star Wars Legion minis.
Okay. How are those coming?
I've gone way too deep. I now own almost everything out. And I bought an airbrush. I brought an air compressor. I've gone too far and I'm not turning back now.
Okay. Any particular squad that you're working on painting right now, or is it just kind of building and amassing them?
I built the core set, and the one thing I like doing is, since I built them, primed them, I tried shaving down all of the mold lines, but some of them are sneaky and you really don't see them until you prime them. So at least now I can see where they are on the Rebel Troop in the original core set. Now I have a second box of them. I'm going to go back and make sure double hit all the lines to make sure they come out nice and smooth. To answer your question, core set.
Okay. What else? Any other gaming? Or is that just kind of the benchmark you've hit?
It's the benchmark. I mean, my girlfriend's addicted to Harry Potter now. So anytime we're together, she demands that we play as many games as we can get through in a night.
Okay.
So that's slowly turning into my life until I can get her onto another game.
How far have you guys made it in that story? Because I've played it myself, and it models kind of the books as far as like game 1, game 2, game 3 through 7, and each one kind of advances your plot line a little bit, and the characters and the cards and things are going to get upgraded, and he who should not be named doesn't come up until like game 5 because that's when he shows up in the books as an actual villain. So how far did you guys get?
Played from game 1 all the way to 6 twice. We keep stopping at 6 mostly because by the time we get to 6 it's 11 o'clock at night. I have work in the morning, and game 7 looks like a whole different beast. The nice thing is they keep each game, I'd say every other game, they kind of add an extra mechanic to it, which kind of keeps it interesting. So you play through games 1 through 3, they're very simple to get into, very easy to follow along, and then they slowly start adding extra and extra rules, start putting out more villains, and the game goes from being a few minute, very quick run through to something that may take you an hour to play through a game.
Okay. That's a little bit of gaming in the last 2 weeks. I personally have kind of gone on the deep end. Last time after we were done recording, we busted out 5-minute Marvel for a couple rounds just to have something quick knock around. Because we've been talking about games, so it was natural sitting in a room full of games that we busted a game out and played.
Yeah, I don't think that me and you even asked if each other wanted to play it. It just kind of appeared on the table, and before I knew it, we were already on our second round.
Right, and that's what I like about it is that fast. Like, okay, this is how we play, and go. 5 minutes later or less, because you can beat it in less than 5 minutes. That's the whole point. but no game lasts more than 5 minutes. So
No.
You either win or you lose by that. The next day I went to my local game store, met up with a couple friends out there. They played Big Trouble in Little China, which was a very interesting co-op game. And then more and more people showed up because that was the board game night there. Mm-hmm. So we ended up getting, I think it was 6 or 7 players to play Hail Hydra.
Oh, how was that?
Hail Hydra is very interesting. It's in the vein of that secret Hitler resistance, that social hidden team that one group's trying to figure out who's the bad guys, and globally everyone's trying to do something. So the art, the components are pretty nice in Hail Hydra. One of the things that they do a little bit differently is everybody's a hero or a Marvel character. Mm-hmm. Whether it be Cap or Iron Man or Hulk or Hawkeye or Black Widow, whoever you play as, and everyone kind of has like their own little superpower that they can activate once per game. So there's a little bit of extra mechanics in there, but ultimately everyone's throwing vote card or points cards, either positive or negative points, to defeat the villain that's attacking New York. If you're Hydra, you want to tank that so that the villain isn't defeated, so that they do damage to New York. If New York is destroyed, Hydra wins. And then at the end of every round of battling that villain, once they're defeated, there's a voting time frame where you go, okay, you're Hydra, or I'm totally not Hydra, or whatever. And then it's a group vote of who gets to sit out the next round. Which, if you vote out Hydra and your shield, that's great, because then they can't tank you. If you vote out someone that's on your team, well, that makes it tougher for you.
Yeah.
So we played actually 3 rounds of that, like kind of back to back. Everybody was really enjoying it, and we kind of got into the swing of things. I will say Hydra won a lot. They won all games.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was. I don't know if that game's set up for Shield to be doing it well, or our Hydra guys were just really good.
Were you Hydra for any of those games?
I was not. Not a single game I was Hydra.
Sorry.
So, it happens. Then the next night, I actually went out to another buddy's place. We played Professor Evil and the Citadel of Time, which is another kind of medium weight co-op game. And then because he picked it up at GenCon, we busted out Magic Maze. We'll talk about it a little bit later, what Magic Maze is, but we played like 3 rounds of that, and I for some reason, I really, really like that game. And he also had picked up a game called Now Boarding. If you've ever been stuck at an airport, this is a game that will either go, wow, I completely understand what's going on, or will infuriate you because you are airlines where random passengers will pop up with destinations, and the goal is a group effort to get them to their destinations. Between rounds, you only have so many spaces you can move, only so many passengers you can carry from airport to airport. And if someone is at an airport at the end of the round, they get anger cubes. And after so many anger cubes, they file complaints. And too many complaints, the entire airline shuts down. It's a little tongue-in-cheek strategy game, but it also has that kind of real-world element. And then the next couple of weeks, I've started traveling for work. So I started thinking about the game while I was sitting in airports waiting to board, and went, oh, wow, no. I'm wondering where this inspiration for this game came out of, because I think I feel it right now. Continuing, I went back to the same person's house the next day. So we're talking Friday, Saturday, Sunday here. Busted out another round of Now Boarding because we didn't do well the first time, so he and I sat down and went, okay, let's try it again. He also got a game called Zombie 15. He said it's a soundtrack-based co-op game where you have 15 minutes to play the game. Each scenario has different objectives. You're a bunch of kids in a zombie apocalypse. Early of game with scenario objectives are, hey, let's go to the police station, and because there's zombies everywhere, we should probably go get stuff. And then you find out that the police station sucks, and then you're trying to get out of town. It's interesting because there's sound cues in the soundtrack of a zombie growl, and when that happens, you flip a card and that many zombies end up in your space. However, it is all live turns, so I'm taking my actions, and as soon as I say your turn, it is now your turn, and if the growl happens on your turn, it affects you opposed to me. But if I don't say it yet, it still affects me. So it's a very quick live game. And then I promised myself that I would do it this year, and I finally cracked it open. We started Pandemic Legacy.
Oh.
And it's way more amazing than I thought it would be.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those games that I kind of kicking myself that I've been sitting on and waiting to find that perfect group. If this is you, and like, man, I really need to find that perfect foursome to play this game with. If you and one other guy or gal will sit down and do it, pull the trigger, don't wait, play this game.
Mm-hmm.
You can always add people later. The game scales just like regular Pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
So whether you're 2 players, 3 players, or 4 players, it will change. Other players coming in later only really just have missed out on opening some boxes and kind of getting a little bit of narrative, but you can easily fill anybody in and what's going on and what's happened. Because you play 12 months worth of games. You have 2 attempts at each month. So if you win, let's say you start the game in January, you play your first January game. You win, you move on to February. But if you lose, you have a second attempt at January before the game advances. Now, if you lose both games of January, you're automatically going to February. So in the box, you have a perfect run of 12 Pandemic games or a terrible loss of 24 in a row. That's going to be what you're going to get out of this box. And most people are going to sit in the middle. You're going to, depending on your game, depending on how it plays, you're going to be one way or the other. You might be a little bit less, you might be a little bit more. I don't know if... I would be shocked to know if anyone did a full 12 of 12 and just beat every month, because some of the twists... The game shifts halfway through the first game. And wow. So this is what we're doing. It's a regular game of Pandemic. Do it. Wait, just kidding. We're going to change something. And it does that a couple times. The next weekend, we did a Game of Thrones LCG tournament at the local store. Had 9 players show up. I ended up being 5th. About good for me, because normally I'm in the bottom. I'm usually like 0-4, 0-3, whatever we're playing. I actually won a couple rounds that time, so I ended up middle of the pack. We had a really good turnout. A lot of the guys were very happy with it. And then more people showed up because it was Labor Day weekend, so great. We had more gaming. Got to try out Dinosaur Island, which is a worker placement that is totally not a ripoff of Jurassic Park, but really is, because it's so 90s, it hurts. And then also, speaking of starting campaigns, the Rise of Fenris expansion for Scythe came out. And we started episode 1 of that too, which, much like Pandemic Season 1, don't sit on it, wait, just go. People can jump in and jump out of that campaign too. You're missing a little bit of story, which anyone can be caught up on. And the other big thing about it is the first game is really just a regular game of Scythe. And nothing's really going to change what you're doing on that first game. We haven't moved on to episode 2 yet, so I'm hoping that we get to that very soon, because I really want to know what happens next. And then because it was Labor Day weekend, I went back and played more Pandemic.
Of course.
We are literally halfway through the Legacy game already. It's been going well, I will say. We've only lost February. And since we lost February, we did it again and won February the second time, and then had a really good string. We should not have won April. I'll phrase it that way, without any spoilers. Everything that could have gone wrong was going wrong, and we pulled it out of the skin of our teeth. So anyone else who's listening has thought about that, good luck. I wish you the best, and hopefully you get April in the bag, and it's not that bad for you. And then we had our local LCG night this week too, which I was actually in town for this time, so I was able to play a couple more games of Game of Thrones. I picked up and busted out one of the intro decks, and just played purely the intro deck, and they're not bad. I'm not going to say they're top tier tournament decks, but they're not garbage either. So it's a very, if you're considering getting into the game, the 8 factions they just released as intro decks, $15. Pick the faction that you like, run with it. They tell you a little, there's an insert in there that kind of gives you a little insight of, if you want to expand this deck, here's our suggested packs that you pick up, because there's cards in these that are going to help what's already here. So they kind of give you a little bit of direction of where to buy, where the game's been around for a handful of years now. So getting into an LCG after it's off the ground is a very tough spot to be in based on the entry point of what's going on. And that has been my 2 weekends of gaming.
Way to make my 2 weeks of gaming seem pitiful, but...
You painted.
I painted, yeah. No, I've done a lot.
I will tell you, I did not paint at all in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So my hobby painting has kind of died. So, it's a give or take sort of hobby. So some days you game for all weekend, and then other days you don't.
I just want to play Legion so bad.
And then there's the whole significant other factor, where if you think work and life balance is a thing, your significant other who may or may not be into the hobby with you is also a big balance game. So always want to make sure that you do things that both of you are happy with and make those compromises, make those things. So I believe that brings us to main topic, if I'm not mistaken, as we did our little recap of what we've done.
We did want to jump back. We forgot to mention that we did play one game at night on GenCon Day 1.
Correct. A little edit to our last episode where we kind of closed out the night and went, hey, we went home. We actually met up with a bunch of friends that we had traveled down with and were staying with and played a game that he picked up right there at the con. He's been a fan of the company for a couple of years, Van Ryder Games. And they have recently had dropped the Kickstarter and was selling the Big Score, which was like a heist game. We busted out, I think we played, 5 players?
Yeah, I believe 5 players.
What's your thoughts?
I thoroughly enjoyed it. He had played the demo before buying the game, but when we actually sat down and played, he didn't play with us. He just kind of gave us a few pointers, and then we jumped into it together. Few bumps, but it was a lot of us getting used to the rules. But after a turn, I want to say after the second turn, we were moving pretty quick, and we kind of figured out exactly what we needed to do. I had a lot of fun. I would like to play at least a few more rounds of that game. I wouldn't mind picking that up and putting that in my collection.
Okay, so our listeners can kind of get a big idea. The game is a heist game. You're a criminal organization. Everyone kind of plays their own color. There's a little bit of differences on them, but for the most part, everyone's kind of doing the same thing. And you're trying to build your heist crew. The first phase of the game is a very much card drafting. Everyone's kind of working towards the same common basic jobs before you actually rob the big bank and get the big score. And with that, you're kind of drafting different colors and different types of characters and moving through a round or two of those. And that kind of gets you set up for the big score. Gives you a little bit of feeling for the game. And then 3 rounds.
I believe it was 3 rounds, and they had a little extra mechanic in there that you could save specialized henchmen for the last round. But after those 3 rounds, we would use those cards to try pulling off jobs that would give us different rewards. And essentially, we're just trying to collect all those rewards. So at the end, tally everything up. The person with the biggest score without getting caught wins.
Right.
You get to that final round.
And that final round is literally a giant bank heist, which ended up being kind of a push your luck draft where you all grab a token, unknown token from a bag, or I think his had the
actual bank
tower. So you kind of reach in, don't see it, you grab a token, everybody grabs their token and reveals at the same time. And then within them, there's so many cops. And if you're if you pull a cop, you're not, there's like a busted level. And you just kind of keep going until everybody's either passed or busted. And then it's a complete score, how much money did you get? It was good. I liked it myself. It had a couple different elements that I've seen before, a couple new elements that kind of like smash them together and create this neat little hybrid game. To compare it to other games, the card drafting was very much like a Seven Wonders style game. where the push your luck mechanic was kind of the new twist on it. Was you kind of played like a mini Seven Wonders game, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, let's keep pulling out this bag, and I'm feeling not so lucky anymore. I'm going to stop and take what I got and run away with it, and hopefully I have more score than everybody else, so that or what actually did end up happening was I ended up winning, but that's because I kind of pushed my luck enough, but the person next to me pushed their luck just a little too much.
That was me.
That wasn't you. No.
No, that was me. I ultimately lost.
Well, so you had to.
The big thing with this game is the awards that you get aren't just, hey, you won $20,000, or you pulled off this heist and received $20,000. It's you pulled off this heist and you received a diamond, or you received a I believe it's golden idol or something like that.
Yeah, there was like golden idol relic tokens.
Yeah,
and the player who collected the most of those
got an additional amount.
And they were worth more per this and things like that nature.
If you had like a bigger set, they were worth more. So it's kind of you're looking at everyone around you, trying to figure out how much does everyone actually have sitting in front of them, because I can have 4 diamonds, but if you had the 4 golden relics, you technically have more sitting in front of you than I do. And it just got to the point where you bowed out, and to bow out in the game, when you put your hand in and pull a token, you just don't pull anything. You just close your fist, have nothing in it. When you reveal that you have nothing in it, that means that you left the heist. And anyone who's still there grabbing can keep grabbing until either they decide that they're done in the heist, or they get busted by the police. I realized that no matter what, you were a ridiculous amount of loot over me. So I eventually just had to keep trying my luck until I pulled that last police token and was busted.
Yeah, that it happens, and it's one of the things. My mechanic on there was I was looking for those hard drives. So
you need the keys to open the hard drives.
Right. So one of the mechanics on that game was you can, during the small jobs, you can get these hard drives, but they're locked. So part of the heist was pulling tokens that randomly were the keys to the encryption to these hard drives, which then gave you a whole lot of money. So I ended up getting a lot of those successfully in such a way where, like, no, that actually worked out way better in my favor than I thought it would. Would that happen again? I don't know. I wouldn't say that's a valid strategy for the game, but it paid off for when I tried it. So good news there. So that was kind of the one thing we missed last episode with the recap of days 1 and 0. So looking at day 2, we didn't really have any events going on that day, so we spent most of the time in the vendor hall itself. The events we signed up for were actually after the vendor hall closed, so it was actually a great day to kind of go see the exhibit halls, see what everybody brought, demo games, see things, and that's where kind of I was all day.
Yeah, we started the morning jumping in real early. I picked up a copy of the new Witcher RPG for one of our friends. He couldn't make it out, but he saw that it was going to be released there, and he didn't have the patience to wait, so he wanted me to snag him a copy. And
yeah, that's kind of a common thread from what I've seen. It's a lot of snatch and grab, and if you don't want to wait for it, that's the place to get it, because you're about a month, 2 months ahead of most releases.
Yeah.
I was very, very important thing that I kind of booked to when the doors open was Call to Adventure by Brotherwise Games. They had just launched a Kickstarter for the game the week before. Then they said they were going to be demoing it at GenCon, and I just went, great, this is a perfect opportunity to jump in, try this game, to know if I'm going to drop money on it and actually back it or not. It's a hero building game where you kind of draft cards from the sets. If you've played games like Mystic Vale or Splendor, they kind of have that very similar feel where you're just trying to gather like tier 1 items, and then you can build up your engine a little bit to get tier 2, and then eventually you get better to get the top level worth of stuff. They have a very interesting game there, and it's very open, very fluid. It felt a lot like the video game Fable.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't necessarily playing a video game, but it was... I had a origin story, I had a major event, and then I kind of had my destiny card, and that shaped the story of my hero. And my guy wasn't was like a... It ended up being like a secret noble who was destined to become like the most dastardly villain in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, this... And like as we were drafting cards, everyone's story kind of started forming on its own based on the cards that they had in front of them, the cards that they were gathering. So it kind of built like its own little narrative without even really trying to force it on you. So I went ahead and backed that one myself because I thought it was a very solid game.
So, and I did like that. They had an interesting mechanic when it came to figuring out if you, was it failed or succeeded?
Yes. So instead of having like a dice roll or things like that, you cast runes, and based on... One side was marked, one side wasn't for most of them. And based on what you had, you could get upgraded versions. And that kind of gave you a binary score of 1 to... You know, either you didn't get or got a point, and if you got enough points, then you could grab the card.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting way, and that was one of the ways you could build your character by trying to find those synergies to get better rolls, to make better cards, to grab better things.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where that came from. So, I'm glad you brought that up because I forgot that was one of those interesting mechanics I liked. That was a little different.
It was something new, and it definitely left an impact on me. Thinking like back now, I just remembered that mechanic, and it was just very, very interesting. Hard to comprehend at first, but as soon as one person made their rune pool and threw it on the table, and all of a sudden it all just kind of clicked, and we saw exactly what needed to happen.
Yeah. So after Call to Adventure, a couple buddies of mine told me about a new game from Flathead Games that was coming up, and a new Crossroads game, just not necessarily in the Dead of Winter universe, but using that Crossroads mechanic in a new game. I've played Dead of Winter a handful of times. You've played it once.
I played it once or twice with you.
Okay. So for people who aren't familiar with the Crossroads mechanic, every player's turn there's this deck of cards that another player is looking at for a keyword or a trigger in the game, whether you are alone, whether you make this sort of check, whether, you know, something... You're watching my turn to see if I do whatever the card says, and if I do it, you stop me and go, and we get this narrative bit. One of my favorite things about Dead of Winter is that mechanic. Is I don't know what's going to trigger that. So I'm doing my turn, and all of a sudden you're saying, "Hey, Justin, stop that." I go, "What?" "Oh, yeah, this thing's totally happening to you." Great. And that's the feeling with Dead of Winter, is you get this very negative, like, you don't want Crossroads cards for the most part. They're almost always bad. There's some good ones hiding out in there, but most of the time, no good. That's not what happens in Gen 7. So Gen 7 is the new game that's coming up. We got to play it with 4 people. It's a campaign-based sci-fi Crossroads game. So they call it Gen 7 because you're the 7th generation on one of these big generation ships. So you're shot off from Earth. You are the 7th generation to be wakened from cryosleep to pretty much make sure this ship is running. Think Wall-E, think Passengers. Maybe not think Passengers. But that idea, that sci-fi concept is out there, where to get from spot A to spot B, it takes generations of time, because there's no faster light travel or hyperspace or anything like that. So you wake up, you're thought out, everyone is a different department head, and you have a little D8 that represents you. And then you have your team that works for you, which are a bunch of little D6s. And it's almost like a worker placement game in that sense, of you're assigning these dice to different stations to get different effects. There's some global catastrophes that are happening that the team has to cooperatively work together between all players to kind of tackle these things together. But also everyone's trying to... corporate life. We're all in this together, but I want to get the one that has the most credit at the end of the day to get the promotion at the end of the day. So everyone's kind of vying for these different power levels and power games, but no one's really out to really roadblock each other. You're just trying to do your job better than the rest of everybody else. The crossroads mechanic comes in when you assign your D8 to someplace, because that represents you in the game. So you go to the operations station, or you go to manufacturing, or wherever, the cryo labs, and that triggers a story event. Nothing is innately positive or negative. One of the ones that we encountered was someone went to the cryo lab, and there was a couple school kids staring at the glass and going, "Oh man, I wish my folks were here. I really miss them." And you get this story choice of, "Hey, school's important. You shouldn't miss school," versus a compassionate more of, "You know what? Let's see if we can, maybe help you out. Maybe get you like a visitation time or something." I can't remember the exact details, but that was kind of the idea. There was a logical answer and then the compassionate answer. Throughout our session, we came across these choices. And there's a compassion / I'm going to call it logical, but I'm trying to go off of memory of what they actually called it. There's so many games that weekend that I can't even remember. At the end of the session, plot kind of happens. Things, we've played X amount of turns, and then boom, the story ends. We get this weird message, this thing happens, and then we have to make this choice of, do we trust this or do we trust that? And then all of those crossroad card choices goes towards this or that vote. So most of our group was very compassionate. We had 3 votes already on the compassionate choice before we even voted. So as a group, with all 4 of us, we would all have to vote 100% the other way to get that story choice to trigger. Drives where you go in this narrative campaign. That was what I found most interesting, is because those crossroad cards in Dead of Winter, I've seen games where like 1, 2 pop up. We had like 3 or 4 in our like 10-turn game. That's a lot different. I think Plaid had found a really good way of making that more active in such a way that I also really, really enjoy it. So that was Gen 7. We kind of split up, you and I. I did find a Decrypto game that was kind of a party game where you're trying to send secret messages to your teammates through coded words to try to get them to guess a 3-digit code, while the other team is trying to intercept and code break. It was neat. It was interesting. The demo was very much... this is by Elo Games, same guys who publish King of Tokyo. So it's a very light, very easy game to get into. One of the fun things that they were saying is like, wait, everybody here, before I even start talking about how this game works, there will be a turn where all of you go, "Oh," and then you'll all get it. So it ran through like the first turn, all of us were like, okay, I think we know what we're doing. We think we know what we're doing. And then like turn 2 was the, "Oh," as we saw like what a full 100%, turn 1 to turn 2 is before the sides flip and we do it all over again. It was a fun, neat game. Also got to demo Magic Maze, which we talked about a little bit earlier when I was playing it recently. Live action. Nobody controls a particular pawn. The theme is a little wonky, in my opinion. You're a group of adventurers trying to shoplift in a mall. Yeah, it's a little weird when you kind of describe it that way. But you get these square tiles that you're trying to explore the mall. There's different characters. There's a barbarian, there's a fighter, there's a mage. And everybody's trying to get to their color so that then they can get to their exit. Here's the twist. You are not any particular pawn. You are not the fighter. You are not the thief. Everybody controls everything. But you only have a certain action you can do. So in like a 4-player game, I can only move pawns north. You can only move them east. Someone else can move them south. So you're working together as a group to try to kind of puzzle this out in the most efficient way while there's a sand timer going. There's a way to flip the sand timer, and if you kind of want to wait until that sand timer is almost gone before you flip it. But you have to get the pawn in the right spot to do so. And here's the real twist. The game is done in complete silence. Nobody can talk to each other.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then they kind of keep building more scenarios as... kind of like that Harry Potter game you're talking about. They start you out very basic, and then they keep adding more and more layers as you keep going to make the game a little bit more complex. Like, oh, now that you understand how this works, we're going to add this twist to it. Now that you figured out that you have to get your stuff and then get out, now there's going to be certain things that only certain characters can do. There's a hole that only the dwarf can fit through. and only he can pass through that particular space on the board and things of that nature. So that was Magic Maze. I also checked in on Breaking Games Rise of Tribes, which is a recent Kickstarter that was being fulfilled. There was also the Reckoners board game, which is based off the Brandon Sanderson Steelheart book series. Steelheart's the first book. They call it the Reckoner series, which was a kind of a co-op challenge, take down the big bad supervillain, or epic as they call him in that universe. So I got to check out a lot of his neat little games at that point. What did you encounter on the vendor hall day 2?
I found that Witcher RPG, or the book for the Witcher RPG, stood in line for Fantasy Flight Games, and I stood in line for Fantasy Flight Games, and then I stood in line for Fantasy Flight Games. It was
They were a little popular.
They were just a little popular. Like you said earlier, you know, you go there to grab the stuff that you're not going to be able to find elsewhere. I didn't realize. So by the time I finally got into Fantasy Flight, kind of going back to what you said earlier, if you're looking for something that day, or if you're looking for something that you may not be able to get outside, you definitely want to check out the convention. They did have a lot of Star Wars Legion miniatures that I didn't realize would be so difficult to find in the wild. So going to a lot of local game stores, no one has certain figures.
Yeah, there's a huge supply-demand.
Yeah.
And when things get reprinted, it takes a long time for those to show up. So, yeah, I know exactly what you mean. It's not just Legion. It's unfortunately something that just happens, and I wish it could really get better, but I don't know if it's going to anytime soon.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still happy with everything I grabbed. I grabbed a few things for another friend who's into Star Wars X-Wing. I'm not ready to jump down that rabbit hole myself, but unfortunately, I went with its stepsister, Legion, and I just keep buying more and more. I picked up Han Solo, which was out a little early there. The one thing I wish I would have grabbed was Leia Organa, the Commander expansion, because I've been having a heck of a time finding that elsewhere. After that, I went back to Brotherwise Games, and I picked up the expansion box for Boss Monster. Me and my friends found out about Boss Monster. I think actually you introduced me to Boss Monster probably like 3 or 4 years ago at this. By now, we've just been obsessed with it. Anytime I go to parties, I always bring it with me because everyone wants to play it. So I picked up the expansion, the box expansion, just to put everything into one box to bring around with me. And then a lot of aimlessly wandering. I'm a little ADD when it comes to conventions, so I would stop and look at a demo, but if it wasn't something that I could actively engage in, I would kind of aimlessly wander until I could find something to get my hands into.
Right, and honestly, there's so much there that there's always something going on, and you can always keep moving, and you might circle back. It happens. I did a lot of that myself, so I know exactly what you mean. And then the vendor hall kind of shuts down at a certain time, but that doesn't mean events are over. We had signed up for a Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition game, which is a tabletop RPG put up by White Wolf Studios. I haven't played Vampire in years, to be perfectly honest. I used to play the 3rd edition. I picked up Requiem when that was like 4th edition-esque, and played a little bit. I didn't like Requiem personally. I wasn't such a fanboy of the, oh my god, they killed my world, they destroyed and wrecked everything. I just didn't get into it. I didn't. The way they changed vampires' society and the social structures, it just didn't make a lot of sense to me. I didn't love it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there's so many other RPGs out there that if I didn't fall in love with it, it just kind of got pushed off to the side. Which is fine. I know people who do love Requiem, so more power to them. You know, whatever you love is what you love. And if you can get to yourself in a spot where you're not crapping on other people's joy, more power to you. So we played Vampire 5th Edition.
It was my first time ever playing, so everything was new to me.
Right. But you've role-played before.
Yeah.
So that part of it wasn't new. It was just Vampire in general.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of went in, like you said last episode, like you've said this episode, you don't do anything half. Dove right in and just ran with it.
Mm-hmm.
Our GM was very, very delighted by us.
Mm-hmm.
We may not have been at the most sober state at the time because this was also like a late night game.
We also had another friend with us who was in the same state as us.
Right.
So we were almost half the table, the three of us. We really took to our characters.
And I think in general, most people had a good enough time with it. Comparing notes with other people, because I had another buddy who played that a couple hours before us. And then afterwards, the story we kind of told each other was like this really interesting narrative of like, yes, we played the same scenario. Yes, we played the same game. But the way things played out, based on player choice, based on GM, it worked very differently.
Mm-hmm.
We had very good success of, I think we were the only group that discovered like the second body that would raise flags for the masquerade and all that. And it was like this, oh wow, you guys are the ones that did that. His group was the ones that decrypted the phone and got the leverage on the elder.
Mm-hmm.
So very different games with the same pieces.
Mm-hmm.
We all kind of started in the same spot with the same toys, with the same characters, and we all ran with it in our own different ways. That was our day 2.
Mm-hmm.
We opened up day 3 with another RPG. That was the Star Wars Fantasy Flight Games, which was set in the Rise of the Rebellion era. So we were kind of a ragtag group of smugglers just kind of coming into things.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was kind of interesting that we ended up in a hyperspace drop right above Seraph.
Mm-hmm.
A little telegraphed that was going to be something that we were going to do, but it was at least fun and interesting. I hadn't played that system before. Have you?
Actually, I've played that quite a few times. I had a friend when the beta came out. They ran a game for us, and so I was familiar with it. But it's been so long that I had not realized that was a Fantasy Flight role-playing game. So all of a sudden, all the dice mechanics made sense to me, and everything started lining back up. And it was one of those just dawned on me. Oh yeah, I played this for, twice a month for a whole year. So,
right.
Yeah.
No, that's why I signed up for this event with us, because I hadn't been able to try their system. I didn't know any groups in the area that were running it where I could jump in and try it. And reading the rule book, I'm pretty good at like soaking in rules. There was something about the narrative dice system that I needed to see it in action to fully understand how the flow of it.
Yeah.
Because I could read a book and went, okay, these successes cancel those. This type of success cancels that. And then what you're left with kind of tells you what to do as a GM. Okay, cool. And then I saw it in action and went, wow, this is a beautiful system. I'm not going to say it's my favorite Star Wars system, though. I will say it's my second favorite. I still am an old school fan of the West End Games D6 system.
Yeah.
But this definitely trumps the Wizards of the Coast roll D20 and then also the Saga system. The Saga system wasn't too bad. But one thing I've always been struggling with Star Wars as an RPG genre is classes. Star Wars doesn't have classes. There's archetypes, sure. Are you a Jedi? Are you a fighter? Are you a smuggler? Are you a pilot? Yes. But to put a level 1 to level 20 class on a character just doesn't make sense to me. In that universe, in that setting. D&D, it works. Fine. It's always been what it is. And it always felt like, especially the D20 Star Wars or the Saga Star Wars, it always felt like we were trying to fake Star Wars D&D. West End never had a caste system. You upgrade whatever skills. You want to get better at flying a ship? Put points into that. You want to get better at smuggling or talking or whatever you want to do? That's where you put your points. And when you get experience points, or what they call the character points, you would be able to put them on anywhere on your sheet. Some GMs had different rules. Usually you had to have used that skill in some capacity before you could grow it. You're not going to become a great con man overnight and be able to talk people out of their credits unless you actually start using that skill. And a lot of that made sense, but you know what? That's what it was. Nobody was one thing or the other. Your skills kind of crafted your character for you. And the Fantasy Flight kind of hits a hybrid. You have a class or a career that gives you a lot of direction, but you are very much free to break that or blend more than one career with another. I think the best way they described it was, if you are a soldier, you are a military soldier, that's always going to be a part of you.
Yeah.
Think of it, our modern day military, your military buddies. They're all going to be a core soldier. But that doesn't mean they can't learn other jobs. That doesn't mean they can't become a pilot. That doesn't mean they can't become a diplomat. It just means at the end of the day, if you really look at the core fiber of the brain, that's still the number one thing that they are, and then they branch off additional stuff from there. And that's where Fantasy Flight kind of does a better job of allowing to create these hybridish characters that Star Wars is really good at. And that was our RPG. I had to duck out a little early because I was a little overbooked that day, and I had to run out to my TAC tournament. How did you feel the RPG went while I was there and then even afterwards?
I thought it went really well. You thought I had enough that within our game you decided that it was more important for your character to branch off from the rest of us to get something done. After you left, you didn't see it, but that actually paid off immensely, because by the time we got back to the ship and we took off, everything was taken care of. The GM afterwards told us that we were one of the few groups that actually didn't have to make repairs to the ship as we're trying to escape while just being assaulted from all fronts. I thoroughly enjoyed the game. It was a very nostalgic feel for me because, again, I played it many years ago. And playing it, honestly, while you went to your TAC tournament, made me go and wait in Fantasy Flight's line one more time so I can go back and buy the book. So it took me...
Kudos on the event for selling product.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to running a campaign for it. I know that you've talked about how, again, like you just said, you couldn't find a group or anyone to play with you. So hopefully I can find a ragtag group to jump in.
A ragtag group of rebels ready to do what needs to be done to save the universe from the evil Empire. Or we're just going to be all Empire agents and, screw those guys.
Yeah.
Whatever it ends up being, I'm looking forward to trying that out and playing more of that game.
Yeah, and I know that we mentioned it on the last episode, but I can't express enough how excited I am. About, I want to say, 2 weeks after GenCon, Fantasy Flight announced that they're adding another core book to this system, specifically dealing with the Clone Wars. So we are going to be seeing,
right,
clone troopers. We're going to be seeing Anakin. We're going to be seeing separatists. We're going to be seeing just everything that, unfortunately, is driving me to spend more money on stuff I don't necessarily need, but have an immense want for. You ran off to the TAC tournament.
Yeah, I ran back off to the TAC tournament. And for those who aren't familiar with the game, TAC is an abstract strategy game.
It's a beautiful game.
Yes, the tagline is it's a beautiful game. Put out by James Ernest from Cheap Ass Games. And then their whole thing was actually a Kickstarter because the game TAC comes from the novel The Wise Man's Fear by Patrick Rothfuss. So it got this huge buzz because there's a huge following for that author. James Ernest has done some really good work too, so his name on the project didn't hurt it one bit. And they came up with this really interesting strategy game that all you're doing is either placing pieces on the board or moving pieces on the board. There's such a deep level of easy strategy. It's like Go, chess.
Mm-hmm.
It's these games that here's the rules, they're not that hard, And then as you play more and more and get better and better, or play better and better people too, you realize how much more deep strategy that there is to this game. I had not played an official tournament before. I've played casually since I got my set. I really enjoy the game myself. I am no way near in the caliber of these people. I went 0-8. I did not win a single match. There was actually one point, because it was a bunch of Swiss rounds, that I sat across it when I went, you or I are going to win a game, finally. It was not me. But I still had a good time. I still enjoyed myself. I still, because it bought me some time, I didn't necessarily make the cut, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
I could have stayed and watched the final matches and kind of seen what they were doing, but I was kind of burnt out on so many games I played. Because a lot like chess, it's kind of a brain burner. The more games you play, the harder it is to think. So I went, okay, great. This is going to buy me some time, because I thought I wasn't going to have any time in the event hall, or in not the event hall, the vendor hall. So I got to go sneak around and do a couple more things that I didn't think I was going to do. I went and saw the booth for Kingdom Death Monster, which, did you get to see that?
No.
It was like tucked in a corner. You had to like find it in a corner, but it was a gorgeous setup. They had all the models on display.
Oh, that was the one that had the really, really, really intricate.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, no, I saw those. Those were gorgeous.
Yes. The price tag matches them.
No,
but I've played the game a couple times because I know someone who has it, and he's invited me over, so I've played it. I've experienced the game. It is not something I'm willing to invest in personally, but I'm really happy I know someone who knows it, has it, so I can at least experience it. And just seeing what they had set up was awesome. So, end of the night, because we try to get the biggest group as we possibly can, we went and tried True Dungeon for the first time. There was 10 of us. Instead of trying one of the this year's rooms, which was like a trilogy of rooms and events, that were also very expensive because they put a lot more effort into the props and the showpiece of it, that they were asking more money for it, which I understand. If you're going to upgrade your level of show, would totally expect people to pay more money for it. But they were also running some of the older events, so we found one of those and dove in one of those because it was not only cheaper, because none of us had done this before. There was 10 of us, brand new. And not a lot of us knew what to expect. We've done escape rooms as groups before, things like that, and we're like, okay, is it like that, or is it something different? I've done live-action role-playing before, so was it more like that? And I really didn't know what to expect. So let's start off with your thoughts of True Dungeon. Where were your expectations, and what'd you think?
Well, I'm going to start off saying that when we got there, I got very nervous because I didn't look up anything on this. I just heard, hey, it's an escape room that's just like a hybrid of an escape room in D&D. Like, that sounds like fun. Until I got there, and we're all standing there waiting to get sat down to go over everything, and everyone's talking about the manual that's online that apparently was very, very long, very, very detailed, and I didn't know about any of that, so I didn't read it. Initially, I was frustrated with the game itself. There are some things that I say could have been done better, mostly speaking to the volunteers in there. There wasn't a lot of communication, it seemed like, between them. But the next day, we actually sat down. I told you, I thoroughly enjoyed the experience. It was fun. It was challenging. It wasn't something that you're used to at all. First time, yeah, we kind of got creamed. Now, knowing what I know, if I jumped, or if we did it again, chances are it'd probably go a lot better than it did.
Right, I would definitely agree with that. Our expectations were one place, the reality was a little bit different. I think you and I walked away probably as the more positive of the group. Of, yeah, we got our butts handed to us. We didn't know what to expect. I was personally frustrated with ended up being the bard role, and every class is very D&D themed, so if you know D&D, you kind of have an idea of kind of what to expect, but every class kind of had their own little shtick that they had to work on. The druid had to memorize leaf patterns to be able to cast their spells. I had to memorize particular like astrological signs, but they weren't the astrological signs to be able to cast some of my stuff. We had 2 people playing wizards that they kind of had their own little thing. Like every magic system had its own thing. Oh, the cleric had like a rosary beads that they had to identify. So every caster had their own unique thing. And knowing that the cast, like going in, we as a group, we knew the casters had like this memory-based thing that they had to do. I don't think any of us realized how deep that was.
That was very, very intricate. I mean, they had you guys looking at anywhere from what, like 12 to...
I think it was somewhere between 24 and 30 icons.
Oh, God.
I without knowing it, I think I probably drew the shortest straw of the group. And what's funny is bards are kind of like that in D&D anyways. They're kind of the jack of all trades, so not only had to do that, but I also had to get good at fighting. And the fighting piece was like a shuffleboard game, which I liked. I'm not going to lie.
That was a lot of fun, yeah.
I wasn't good at it, but I liked it. So there was this really interesting, okay, this is what it is. I know some of our other group was really burnt out on it because we were more used to the escape room style games opposed to this. The production value I expected more out of than what I got, but I also, again, might be spoiled on those escape room games that are very immersive.
It was one of those where we're used to stuff that's stationary, that they don't have to build it in a few days and then tear it down a few days later. Right.
And I think that was a big piece of it, and I think that colored the group's overall reaction to the True Dungeon. Now, I thought it was really interesting because this is such a deep thing. True Dungeon, people travel to just do True Dungeon. You get these poker chip items that have different values on them, and there's a whole training commodity on this thing. It's insane. If this is what you want to do, and this is what you really want to do at a cons, go for it. There's a lot to do. You can go really deep into this thing. From a casual, if you're interested, I would definitely say take the route that we did and go for maybe an older room or lower cost room. Get your feet wet, get your taste buds, or if you know someone or have a friend who's into it, go along with them. Have a guide or have a coach. Going as a complete blind group, I think, punished us a little bit, but I think as a group we got to learn together too at the same time. So, it was fun. I would probably do it again, but I don't know if everybody in that group would say the same.
Yeah. I would also say try to plan in advance, because when we got in there, we only had, I want to say, 15 minutes for us to go through picking classes and then opening our little packs of tokens. Another suggestion, too, is stop over at one of the resellers in the vendor's hall. They will have buckets of these tokens, and they'll sell like the common items real cheap, so you can actually have gear. A lot of us went into this dungeon without having half of the gear, maybe even a quarter of the gear that we actually needed.
Right, but remember that was the point of this one. It was they called it a sealed dungeon. So all we could get were those sealed packs that they gave us. We weren't allowed to bring anything else in.
Really?
Yeah.
Strike that.
But for other rooms that aren't sealed, definitely want to follow that advice.
Yeah.
But this was definitely a sealed room is a great room to get your feet wet and start this process. That's kind of the whole point behind them. So that was True Dungeon. That was our day 3, Saturday. Anything else?
No, after that we went
home and passed out.
Yeah. Prying eyes of all the armadillos.
Those freaking armadillos, man. Yeah, there were too many armadillos in that place.
Yeah.
Too many.
Disturbing amounts of armadillos.
I'm still shocked to this day that we haven't unpacked a game and found an armadillo in it secretly. They just smuggled themselves with us. Then it brings us to last day Sunday, which in years prior, when I went a decade ago, Sunday was kind of not much of a happening day. It was everyone's closing up, and a lot of cons, the last day is especially Comic-Cons, with the figurines and statues, that are places that are we don't want to ship this stuff anymore and have it potentially break. What do you want to buy it for? We're asking $80. What do you want?
Yeah.
Where you can make some really good deals and steals on that last day. GenCon, not so much. It was still pretty active for the first part of the day. Later, as it was kind of wrapping up that last hour or so, I definitely started seeing some of that. But early on, went to the Artist Alley with a couple of our buddies, and I almost regret not checking out the Artist Alley sooner. There's so much to see. There's so many talented people there. Definitely make time for it, even if it's an hour or two that you get to wander, talk to them, see their stuff. Even if you are not in the market of buying, check it out. There's amazing stuff out there, and these people, and I grabbed a bunch of business cards for later. Gonna try to talk my wife into a couple pieces of like, hey, you know what, we've been talking about getting some art. What do you think of these artists? I thought they were really great. And there's some stuff that isn't necessarily super geeky or nerdy that I may be able to get in my own home.
Sneak it under the radar. We aimlessly wandered quite a bit. We didn't have any events. We didn't really have anything planned. I don't even think we even had a time plan for us to leave. We just aimlessly wandered, took in everything that we could. And like you said, earlier in the day, there wasn't a whole lot of wheeling and dealing. But towards the time that we left, closed at 4 and we left at 2, then you started seeing all the carnival barkers coming out with just random employees coming out. I have one left of these. Normally it's $80. Hey guys, buy it right now, $35. Just because they're just trying to clear the last little bit out so that they can have less to bring home. Right.
They don't have to ship it back. They don't have to repack it. Anything and I totally get it from their perspective. If they can clear their shelves out, that is so much less work for them to have to worry about. No inventory, no nothing. Just it's gone. How many did you sell? All of them. So whereas you got into that Star Wars hook and you got into that Star Wars RPG book, I already own that book, so I didn't really have that urge to let me go get it. But after Friday playing Vampire 5th Edition, I did go and pull the trigger for 5th Edition Vampire early. It was one of my treats to myself. Is normally I'm overloaded with things already, so let me not buy things that'll come out later. This one I did.
We, both of our significant others talked to us separately. So my girlfriend talked to Justin, Justin's wife talked to me, and we were told to keep an eye on each other because the spending habit's real.
And I'd like to note, most of the spending we did is actually when we separated.
It is. Actually, that is very, very true.
So, it happens.
Yeah.
The big thing that I wanted to do from GenCon, and I didn't really get around to this last day. I know you were wandering, looking for deals. I core of my being needed to try Arkham 3rd Edition. Or Arkham Horror, the board game 3rd Edition. As well as Keyforge, which we got our decks for, and I'm like, you know what? Let me demo a game. Let me see what this is like. I'm here, they're showing it off all weekend. Let's see what it is. I liked playing Keyforge. I don't know how well the game's going to do based on its unique nature of buying these random decks. You don't know what you're going to get. You don't modify the deck. You don't deck build. But it's a different type of game. Or it's my team, my factions versus your factions. There's no resources in it. The big thing is your deck will have 3 of 7 houses, or great houses as they call them in their universe. And you're trying to forge these keys. That's the whole point of the game. But there's no resources, no mana, there's no I need gold or I need fate or whatever game you play, you don't need that resource control. What you do is at the start of your turn, you declare what faction you're playing of the 3 in your deck. You can play as many of that faction in your turn.
Interesting.
Furthermore, when you have your attack board out there, those are the only creatures that can attack. You might have other ones, but they can't attack because you're not playing that faction that round. Very interesting. So it's a really good check and balance of how not to have resources, and where I can play 6 cards if they all happen to be the same faction. Great. I never saw that. There was one turn I think I had 4 of one faction in my hand, and I did a pretty good turn based on that. So that was kind of the game mechanic that I found was very interesting, was this non-resource, just play what you got, you're just playing one of the three factions, that's your restriction instead. I liked it. I'm definitely going to be checking out when it comes out for real. Hopefully getting a group around, maybe get some tournaments organized. And then I played Arkham Horror 3rd Edition. A couple of our friends that are with us kind of circled by me and went, "Are you still playing this?" I'm like, yes, I am. I really enjoyed the game. One of the pieces, it's taking a lot of cues off of the other Arkham franchise games. So there's a little bit of Arkham Horror still left in it. There's a little bit of Eldritch Horror in it. There's a little bit of the card game in there. Can't really call out anything that was Elder Sign, but a little bit of Mansions. There was a little bit of Mansions of Madness in there too. So each ancient one that you play has a particular setup of the board. So there's going to be different hubs and different districts of the town based on who you're going up against. Also, that who you're going up against has a narrative deck. And there's a kind of this branching narrative that will weed itself into the game. So that's where you get this LCG mechanic where there's this narrative flow. The board's modular, so that's where your Mansions of Madness comes. The Eldritch Horror one that I liked was, normally with the Arkham games you get these clue tokens which allow you to reroll dice. In some of the later games like Eldritch Horror and Mansions of Madness and even the card game, you can improve your stats. So your character has a willpower stat that's normally printed at 2. Well, you can get this token that'll bump them up to 3. In the Arkham Horror 3rd Edition, those tokens are your rerolls. So you can keep it on your sheet as a +1 to your willpower. And every time you roll willpower, you're rolling 1 extra die, which is great. Or you can burn it to reroll something. So if you burn it, well, now you don't get that +1 anymore on the next check that you have to make it on that stat. That was one of the neat things I thought was, okay, that's a little refreshing, but I can kind of see where the inspiration came from of smashing 2 other mechanics they already had together and created this new mechanic.
I can kind of dig it, yeah.
On that. So I was a big fan of it. It felt very organic. The other thing that they did that was similar, I will say similar to the LCG is, if you remember in the LCG, there's that Chaos Randomizer bag. You stick your hand in the big bag of darkness and pull out a token that says you're good, you're bad, or something happened. The Mythos phase is that pull.
Oh.
And there's different types of tokens, and that depends on what happens. So it might be monsters that spawn, it might be clues spawn, it might be this event happens. There's a bunch of different options in there. Some are good, some are bad, most are bad. But the idea is you don't know what you're getting out of that pull. And when you pull out of it, it doesn't go back into the bag until the bag's empty. So the probability of the bad stuff happening, if you have a good pull, he has a good pull, and then it's my turn, I may not have a good pull because of what you guys did, or maybe I'm safe because you guys got the bad stuff already. So that was a very interesting mechanic. It's a little bit different because the Mythos decks before were a stack of cards, you flipped one over, you got a little bit of story out of it, and then in the 2nd edition game, monsters moved along a predestinated track. Either they moved clockwise or counterclockwise around the board. Maybe you got in a little bit of narrative, maybe some other stuff happened, maybe a gate opened. It was very, here's the game's turn, this is what the game does. This felt a little bit different from that. This felt like this is what the game is doing to you, and you alone as this player. Alright, my turn. This is what the game is doing to me on my turn. So that's where I felt it was really good. I'm really looking forward to it. It's supposed to be out this, I think that if I remember right, they said 4th quarter. I'm crossing my fingers that in another month or so I'm going to be in Minnesota for the Arkham Knights event, and that they will have extra copies there to sell early, because I will definitely be walking home with one if it's up there. I'm really excited for this game. I don't know if I've said that enough yet.
This is your Star Wars Legion, I gotcha.
Yeah, no.
Except you have a longer, richer history with it versus me and my whole month of painting.
Legion's only been out less than a year. You're okay.
Fair enough.
Arkham Horror's been out, well, the 2nd edition's been out since 2005. The original edition was 1987, so it's been a while. that Arkham Horror has existed, I started on the second edition game and have been playing it since. So yeah, that's
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's my bread and butter game that I love to go to, and the card game I've been playing the heck out of since it came out 2 years ago. So it's not just the Arkham Horror board game, but the Arkham Files series that I just keep playing and loving. So that's going to be one of our upcoming episodes. Just once I come back from Arkham Knights, I'm definitely going to be wanting to talk about that. And then also coming up on our next episode, so episode 3, what we wanted to do is go over and talk about common terminology in games.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking things like, what the heck is a meeple?
Obviously, it's a meat people.
Right. What is a meeple? What is a tableau builder? What is a Euro game? What is a Ameritrash? Like, there's all these common terminologies, LCG versus a CCG.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of jargon in this hobby and in the industry. So what we want to talk about is kind of to detangle that, kind of give a lexicon of sorts, a little baseline knowledge. Now, if you're in the hobby, and you probably know most of this stuff by now, but if you are new to the hobby or have only been in it for a handful of years, there might be some terms you haven't heard before. I'm always learning new ones too, just as I'm learning more things about games and development and the deeper, darker, deep side of things.
And I definitely know all the terms, but I am going to make sure that Justin explains them all for your benefit as the listener.
I don't know if they believe you.
I don't know if I believe me, but I'm going to fake it till I make it.
Sounds like a plan. So until next time.
This is Ricky.
And this is Justin. Happy rolling. You've been listening to Tabletop Arcanum, hosted by Justin Taylor and Richard Geese, and featuring the original music by Paul Moore and Isaac Gilbert. You can follow us on most social media platforms. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave us a review on whatever platform you listen to podcasts. As always, thanks for listening.